Hello and welcome to the Engerati studio at African Utility Week, and I'm joined by one of our veteran interviewees, Philipp. Welcome back to the studio. Last time we met, it was in Amsterdam at the European show, and Philipp is president and CEO of KG Technologies. So. In the 6 months since we met, you've promoted yourself.
No, I think the board has promoted me at the company, and I want to thank my brothers for their confidence in my capabilities, and I'm enjoying the challenges that come with it.
Yeah, no, that's great, and it's great to see a sort of independent company playing at this level as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great for you guys. And Philipp, we met last night at the welcome reception, and we were both kind of talking about the confirmation of some rumors that have been floating around in the UK industry now about the delay in the meter rollout. How does that affect you guys? Because you guys manufacture the relays that are going in there, and I gather there's some big contracts waiting and things like that.
Yes, well, it was disappointing to hear that news. It's been a long time running and preparing for that market for quite some time, making the capital investments into our infrastructure to make sure that we actually have the capability and the capacity to serve that market when need be, and when it starts ramping up. And of course, those investments have been made because we're anticipating the rollout to be happening sooner than it actually is happening now with the news out of the UK. So it was disappointing, and it's impacting us as we now will have a much later return on our investment. But we are hoping that other markets will pop up that would maybe bridge that gap, and that it doesn't negatively impact the overall pricing of the product, since the investments have been made. And you need to make sure that you can recoup those investments.
So actually, ironically, a delay could result in an increase in price of meters and everything, because people are sitting on more capital investment, and R&D doesn't stop. So
exactly.
All that. What do you think is the real reason? Because I was reading an article, a couple of articles online, one from The Guardian, where there were some quotes by utilities saying, well, this is great news for us because we'll be able to properly roll it out, but surely that should have been done. But what do you think is at the crux of this delay?
Well, I watched an interview last year I had with the president and CEO of Linus and Gear, Mr. Umbach, and I think that really hits the core of this debate that's going on right now, is the fact that if you make the investment for meters in the market, what happens if that customer then changes utility companies, and that utility company has a contract with a different meter manufacturer? So making sure that those investments aren't lost is, I think, that one of the key issues that are up for debate right now, that the utility companies is having with the governments.
So the key issue about who pays for the upfront infrastructure costs, how do they get reimbursed when, let's say, 200 homes, it's not as simple as that. 200 homes suddenly go to another utility, but that meter is still in there and all that stuff.
Yes.
You think that's at the crux of this delay, and that's what really needs to be sorted out.
Exactly. And this is a long debate that'll be going on with different utilities having different priorities, and how do you manage this so that in the end everybody wins, which is of course always a very difficult situation to achieve.
And it's particularly complex in countries where people are trying to create a free market for utilities as well, isn't it?
Yes.
If you've got a monopoly, I suppose that issue is less of it's a non-issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
you don't see that issue really in China with the state grid, in Mexico with CFE. You don't really see it too much here in South Africa with ESCOM, and it's because it's one utility that's basically powering the entire country.
So one utility has its benefits, and that thing is there. Probably a discussion for another interview at another time. But I also wanted to link back to our previous interview, and in our previous interview we were talking a lot about standards. I remember you mentioning that you guys were working quite hard to hit the standards and things like that. And where is the industry, particularly your end of the industry, in terms of the relay and the actual guts that make these smart meters work? Where is the industry in terms of getting to the standard that's been ratified?
Mm-hmm. Well, in Europe, you mainly in South Africa, you mainly have to comply with the IEC standards, and there's been some discussions about how those standards are being interpreted. And so there's some misinterpretation of the true standards and meeting those. There's many companies that make a claim that they actually meet the standards. Unfortunately, they only pass a certain section of the standards and not the whole standard as a whole. And we understand that it's very important that the relay is actually a safety switch. It's a safety component inside the meter, and therefore we actually put a lot of R&D and emphasis into it to make sure we pass all the standards that are there, whether that's electrical life, short circuit requirements, a dielectric strength. So these are all issues that if you truly read into the heart of a product, you have to make sure that you encompass all those.
So are the standards ambiguous? Is it? I mean, look, it's a bit. It sounds a bit like, Formula One, where you've got a standard and then all the teams interpret it in a multitude of different ways. And does the issue lie with an ambiguity within the standard and a clarification that needs to be done there, or is it rigor of interpretation?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I think the standards, there's no one standard that lists all the criteria. You have to really delve deep into the standards, and they always reference other standards in order to find what the true requirements are of the entire industry. But then there's also some misinterpretation because different grids have different voltages, different grids and different utility companies have different requirements, where some aspects of those standards may not be required. Other utility companies have actually gone well above that. They've had pilot runs, small meter rollouts, and realized that there are other aspects that are not in the standards that need to be adhered to make sure that this product is truly safe. So there's applications, ERDF is doing a very good job in making sure that the relay aspect of the meter itself is a true safety switch. So I think there's a lot to be learned from ERDF, and we're learning on a daily basis as to what they see is happening on the grid. And that's because they've done their homework and doing a very good job in having rollouts, testing, making sure that they take the meters back and evaluate those to ensure that the product is safe for the consumer.
Because that does seem a bit like deja vu to the last interview, where we kind of said that actually one of the issues is that no one's pulling together all of these standards. Like, okay, you've got the IEEE on the internet. They did a pretty good job there. IPv6 is the standard, and everybody knows about it, and it's set, so everything works. And it strikes me that no one's really doing that job because it's so vast and it's dynamic as well, isn't it?
It is, and there's so many different utility companies out there, and everything's running at different currents, different voltages. So making one standard that would encompass everything may be an overkill for some applications, and other applications it might be quite time consuming to get all the utility companies to come to an agreement. So we see that, especially the ANSI market in North America and the IEC markets, they're quite different, but in some aspects they mirror each other. But given the different grids, you have to then really get a good understanding of what is required.
Yeah, because there's 270 volts, or is it 250 volts? Where do you apply?
120 in the USA.
Yeah. So where do you apply that? So one of the other things we touched on was the safety aspect of what the relays and what you manufacture and things like that is kind of key. So that then ties back into getting the standards right. Because otherwise, you don't want this thing to blow up.
Exactly, and if it's not done properly, that's exactly what will happen. There's standards for what happens during a short circuit when the relay is closed and actually conducting current to the house. But what happens is if the relay is open and they're just installing a meter and there's already a short, how does the relay perform when you're closing into that short circuit? And in all aspects, the relay must still remain functional afterwards and must carry that short circuit. It must, in some cases, contain any damage, or in other cases, it simply has to still work just like it did before. And that's a very difficult requirement. The IEC UC3 requirements are quite strict. You have to pass 30 times nominal current, which is, at 100 amp meter, all of a sudden that's a 3,000 amp short circuit.
And for anybody who has done their physics at any point in their life, they'll know that you don't want to get too close to something like that.
No, definitely not. That's during the development of our product line, I've seen plenty of relays blow up before we went out into the market and make sure that we have a product that is consistently meeting those standards. We take them off the production line all the time to make sure, and we have in-house testing to comply with those requirements all the time. It's important to me and that I can actually sleep well at night, knowing that the products that we put out there are safe.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and at the end of the day, it's your duty to do that as well, because
Exactly.
you don't want to be at the end of some sort of consequence of not having done that due diligence. If we can go local for a second, because we're here in South Africa, lovely weather, so especially for me with what we've been going through in London. What are the things you're seeing in the market here, especially that excite you? Because you've clearly invested into this event, and what are the things you're looking forward to over the 2 days?
Well, I think here South Africa is still a very predominantly prepayment market. But there's new applications that are coming up for demand-side management, where the utility companies have then the power for load shedding, where they don't have to then have rolling blackouts to disconnect the entire homes, but really being able to disconnect certain appliances, whether it's a hot water heater or geysers as they call them here, swimming pools, air conditioners, to make sure that the grid doesn't fail. And I think that's a really opportune market for us, and our products perfectly fit into those applications.
And you're seeing that investment aggressively happening, or are we at pilot stage? Where is it?
I think it's not happening as aggressively as I was hoping.
Clearly.
But the demand is there, definitely. We're seeing the development of those products. We're seeing the pilot runs of those products. And I think that this would actually be a very opportune time to do this. It's much cheaper to make the homes being able to load shed, as opposed to building new power plants. The regulations of those can take years. The building of a power plant can take years. Yeah. So actually making the grid more efficient is the most cost-effective way to go about it, and making sure that in the end, when you do build up new power plants and the populations continue to increase, that you're not again hitting another ceiling where you're running at a point where you have to make another huge investment with the power plant.
Well, you got to play both sides of the coin, haven't you?
Of course.
You got to learn about how to drive efficiency, so that when that next, you're right, a power plant, it doesn't. It's not like a construction project. It doesn't. Yeah. Well, it is a construction, but it doesn't. It doesn't get done in a year or something like that. Well, Philipp, always a pleasure to see you here in the studio, and thanks again for your candid views and everything. This has been another Engerati interview, this time at African Utility Week, and we hope to see you again live soon with some of the other interviews. And check out our sites, lots of presentations to watch on demand, lots of case studies, lots of white papers, and it truly is a global and the biggest content resource for the smart energy market. Thank you for watching.